Jerusalem. It's 10 o'clock, I think, at night there. And
Yep.
yep, absolutely. So Shavua Tov to you. We're still in the middle of Shabbat. Shari is a star, I would say. I have taken a lot of trips, had a lot of tour guides, and when I find one that I like, I hold on to them for dear life. And once I found Shari, I was like, this is the Shara tour guide, because she knows how to speak in regular English and how to teach us in ways that we can relate to. And one of the people said to me, and you'll hear it in the video Saturday tonight, he said, on our last Israel trip, we were able to not just tour, but to be part of the land. And that was because of Shari and her wisdom and the beautiful way she communicates the love of our ancient homeland called Israel. So with no further ado, welcome Shari back to Shara Malot. I can tell you there are about 60 people here who are so glad to see you, who you toured the guide before, and many more for whom this is your first introduction to them. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Steinberg, and thank you to all the sponsors. This is an incredible weekend you have, and being part of it, being able to take a small part of it is really quite an honor. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can start getting going here, because this is indeed a virtual tour. And we're going to just kind of head on off here. You can recognize one of the logos already, you know, the Shara Malot logo, but I want to start this tour by actually talking about the other logo, which is also the symbol for the Ministry of Tourism, and it's related to a biblical story, the story of Joshua and Caleb, two of the 12 spies. Moses sends out one spy from each of the 12 tribes to go check out the land. And 10 of them come back with, not such a great story. Two of them, Joshua and Caleb, come back and they say, look, this isn't going to be easy, but this is an amazing opportunity. This is an amazing land. In fact, check out the grapes. They're so big that we have to hoist them up on a pole on our shoulders. So you can understand why the Israeli Ministry of Tourism wants this actually to be the logo, because when you have the opportunity to come here, you become spies and you go back with a report. Now, this particular logo was actually drawn by my daughter. Some of you who were here remember me talking about my older daughter, Eliana. She's actually now in the Air Force, and she drew this. I'm in the back. My wife, Hannah, who's also a tour guide, now also a rabbi, recently ordained, and we're carrying the grapes. And I invite all of you on this tour to see yourself as being spies. Now, notice the drawing here, though. Hannah in the front, she's wearing sandals, and I'm wearing shoes in the back. And we just were all with Cantor Schiffler. A lot of us were like dancing with our feet and really having a good time with the music. So I invite you to kind of look at your feet for a moment. You know, what's going on with your feet? Well, we're going to look at a big journey here that was taken, a biblical journey that was taken here by Abraham, who leaves his home in Mesopotamia. My home was Cleveland, Ohio, and 36 years ago, I left, not by foot, got on a plane, and ever since, Jerusalem has been my home, and for the last more than 30 years, I've had the opportunity to guide people and share this country with people and just share your home here. So Abraham, though, he then gets up and he goes. Lech lecha is what God tells him to do. Get up and go from Mesopotamia, and he makes it all the way over to Canaan, or Canaan in Hebrew, and he even goes over into Egypt for a while. But to sort of understand the geopolitics of ancient times, and even today, you visually can see here from this satellite photo that today, modern day Israel, or ancient Canaan, is really wedged in between two superpowers. Egypt was always very stable. Mesopotamia then gets conquered. It becomes Assyria, it becomes Babylon. The Babylonians destroy the first temple. Then it's the Greek Empire, then the Roman Empire. The Romans, they destroy the second temple. After that, the Byzantine, and basically you make your way all the way up to Iran and Iraq, which is not a very stable area. So you can understand then this big picture really of what's happening when Abraham gets up and go. And when he goes, we're going to do a Regel Shalivrit here, a moment of Hebrew. He picks up and Sarah picks up and they take their feet, their raglaim, and 1 foot, a regel, 2 raglaim, and they start to walk. That's why I said, look at your feet, because when you come here physically to Israel, you physically, with your feet, you're getting in your car, you're going to the airport, on the plane and on the bus, and it's all through your feet. And we're doing this now virtually. What you have on your feet? Well, biblically, maybe sandals. But na'al, 1 shoe, na'alaim, 2 shoes. I recognize there's a wide breadth here of Hebrew knowledge. And so I'm giving you transliteration as well. And the beauty of the Hebrew language is that a 3-letter root system allows other words to come into being. So here we've got then Raglaim, this guy is walking in, and we all know that even from a distance, you can recognize the way that somebody walked. We call it their gait. And using the 3-letter root here in transliteration would be RGL or Resh Gimel Lamed. You also have the word habit, hergel, how you walk is very habitual. Na'al, shoe, na'alaim has the same roots for if you want to lin'ol, to lock a door, or in this picture, a man'ul. And so when we understand on a deeper level the Hebrew language, we understand deeper this particular verse that comes from Shemot, from Exodus, that when God is talking to Moshe, to Moses, God actually says, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. And the very simple understanding of this is take your sandals off your feet because you're standing on holy ground, or take your shoes off because you're standing on holy ground. And yet a much deeper understanding of this comes from when you know that these root words of feet and shoes, of habit and locks, that on a much deeper level, what God is saying to Moshe is unlock yourself, open your mind. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is because, yes, we walk the land with our feet, but those of you that have been here, either with me or in other contexts to Israel, we have to really open our mind here, because traveling to Israel virtually is a very different experience. Okay, I know we don't have to deal with the traffic, and there isn't the question about where's the next bathroom stop and what are we having for lunch, all of those issues. So we have different issues. We have the issue of maybe your bandwidth isn't quite strong enough that when I'm going to be showing you some videos, because I did go out into the field, and we're going to be seeing in this hour tour together, we're going to be seeing me out in the field as a way to bring you here to Israel. But sometimes there are technical issues, and those are the virtual tour issues in the same way as getting stuck in a traffic jam or the bus breaking down. The word feet also is 3 times a year in our ancient history. We would come and bring sacrifices on Sukkot in the fall, and Pesach in the spring, and then Shavuot. And those are called the 3 pilgrimage holidays, or Shloshet HaRegalim, because we would literally come up with our feet. So we're going to be doing some traveling today, and we're just going to be doing it virtually. Continuing the story of Moshe. This is an ancient map. Moshe eventually gets the people over to Sinai. I put it in pink for you. This map then for people who couldn't cross over the Jordan River in the 7th century. In the country, as it's called today, Jordan, in their church floor, they made a map, a mosaic map of what the land looked like. That's why the piece is missing, because the mosaic floor had been damaged. So where I'm going to be taking you right now is basically from Sinai to where you can see that this 6th century map discovered in the city of Madba, discovered in the year 1884, just where like the number 4 is, that's where we're going to be going to. In the country of Jordan, mountainy bowl. But take a closer look at this map, and you can see what I've labeled for you, the Jordan River. Number 4 on this map. You can see how it squiggly goes in, dumps into the Dead Sea. The city of Jericho. Moshe was able to look over into Jericho. And then later on, we're going to be going up to Jerusalem, which you can also see in this map. But getting from Sinai and all the way over here, you can ask that question then, no, what really took so long? Well, okay, the jokes are plentiful. The one I always like to share is, had somebody bothered to stop and ask Tzipporah, Moshe's wife, for directions, because Moshe wouldn't ask for directions, it wouldn't have taken us really 40 years. I really don't think it would have taken that long. But more seriously, when Moshe finally, after 40 years of listening to all this fetching from the Israelites, gets to this view, meaning 3,200 years ago, 1200 BCE, before the Common Era, Moshe is basically in the book of Deuteronomy given the world's first virtual tour. What do I mean by that? Let's read this. And Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto Mount Nebo, or Nevo in Hebrew, to the top of Pisgah, that is over against Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, even Gilad, as far as Dan, and all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah, as far as the Hinder Sea, and the south, and the plain, even the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Where we are standing, where this picture was taken, is on Mount Nebo. Today there's a Carmelite church there. And the direction that we're looking into is we are looking into Israel, just as Moshe did. I often wondered, what was that like? The frustration to have 40 years done that job and not be able to cross over. And if you look at the distances here, a bird's flight from this spot to Jerusalem is 46 kilometers. It's about just under 30 miles. He was able to see Jericho as well. A poet by the name of Rachel Blaustein is her full name, but everybody knows her by Rachel. In a moment, we'll actually be seeing her grave along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, often compared herself to Moshe. She came in the wave of the second Aliyah. That was the wave of immigration where the kibbutz movement was established, and all she wanted to do was to work the land, and unfortunately, she became ill and wasn't able to finish the job, just like Moshe. So this is my particular copy of Rachel's poetry, and I'll read part of it in English, and then I'd like to read the last verse for you in Hebrew, and now we'll see that it is engraved on her tombstone. The heart listens, the ear attuned. Will he come? With every expectation, there is sadness of Mount Nebo. One beach opposite the other, on one riverbank, rock decrees parted forever. Stretch your wings, see opposite over there. No one comes, each person and her Mount Nebo on the vast land. The last verse, Ufros Kapaim, Ra'o Mineged. Mineged is the name of the poem. Shama Ein Ba, Ish V'navolo al Eretz Rabbah. And she wrote this in the winter of 1930, and then the following year died, not in the place that she wanted to, along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, but instead in Tel Aviv. So to understand the topography, because we'll be getting to the shores of the Sea of Galilee, I want to show you this map where you can get the sense that if we start from the Mediterranean Sea at sea level, the green, the light green, then we begin to get into what are called the lowlands. We come up to a mountain range, a north-south mountain range, and then a very long north-south green, which is the lowest place on the planet Earth. That is where the Dead Sea is, the Jordan Valley. And then you can see that it becomes yellow again, and that's where we were just standing on Mount Nebo. Now, I mentioned that on top of Mount Nebo, there is a Carmelite church? Well, there is a Carmelite nun that you know from a famous movie, and she actually sings and helps us understand a little bit about the topography of the land of Israel.
Now, if you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far. Don't worry, baby, just call out my name. I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry. But baby, there ain't no mountain high enough. Ain't no valley low enough. Valley too low. Ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you, baby.
That's really the topography. Indeed, we have valleys and we have hills, and where we're going to be going now is from the Sea of Galilee, which in Hebrew is called Kinneret, because the black arrow then points to the Sea of Galilee, and that shape is a little bit like a biblical kinnor, which is a shape like a harp in a way. And again, using that three-letter root of K-N-R in transliteration, we get to Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. And then we're going to be going on up to Jerusalem. But first, we're going to be up in the north a little bit by going here to Rachel's grave. Rachel Blaustein then made Aliyah 1909. This is her grave. That's the book of poetry that I just read to you from. And hey, anybody who's been here to Israel, 20 shekel note, holding it in your hand, well, that's what she looks like. You'll be seeing me later on holding a 20 shekel note as I buy a falafel for us to eat. So from here, we get a really, from up above, a totally different view of from space. In fact, this was a picture that was snapped by Jessica Mayer, an American Jewish astronaut. And I think today, especially, to take a moment for us to remember the first Jewish woman astronaut, Judith Resnick, who just a couple of days ago, January 28th, 35 years ago in 1986, in the Challenger, lost her life as an astronaut. Jessica Mayer, though, when she takes this photo, she's showing us then, as I've circled it for you, the Sea of Galilee. And she was just chosen, by the way, to be one of 18 astronauts. Half of them are women that are going to start training for a moon landing, and that is slated for 2024. And if she gets chosen to land, walk on the moon, she will be then the first Jewish woman to do that. That's a pretty incredible thing. What else we can learn from her is this photograph is pointing out to Tel Aviv. This is actually where her Iraqi Israeli physicist father, who passed away, where he grew up. This is the Dead Sea. And if you go further south, I've given you a compass here to kind of orientate yourself. Further south, you get to Eilat and the Red Sea. You can even kind of see this triangle then, where the other body of water then leads up to the Suez Canal. And that's kind of the neighborhood as we can see it from space. But this is not the first image that we have, because our first astronaut, Ilan Ramon, who unfortunately also in an accident that does happen when one takes on space travel in February 2003, Ilan Ramon in the Columbia lost his life, but he was our first Israeli astronaut. A song was played for him one morning, which meant that Hebrew was heard out in space. His wife, Rona, and their son, they had 4 children. Asaf followed in his father's footsteps and became an Air Force pilot, and very tragically, though, in an accident, a training accident, died in 2009. One of their other children, though, Tal is here. This picture was just taken. He's holding out his arms, as he said his mother would have done with great joy. This photo was taken at the president's residence, Ruby Rivlin, where it was just announced that we are going to send our second astronaut up in space. He had been under the command of Ilan Ramon and a good family friend, Eitan Steve, who's going to spend some time in the International Space Station, just like Jessica Mayer did. And he's slated sometime this year to go up in space. But this is not our only Israel connection to space. Actually, in 2011, we competed in a contest to try and send an unmanned spacecraft to land on the moon. Cantor Schickler began his incredible concert singing the words from Genesis, Breshit. In Breshit, in the beginning, Genesis, that was the name of our little spacecraft, which was about the size of a washing machine, actually. And when it was so close to landing on the moon, unfortunately, the braking system failed. And in April of 2019, it ended up on the moon, but just in thousands of pieces. It made us, though, the 7th country to make lunar orbit, and actually the 4th country after the Soviet Union, the United States, and China to attempt a soft landing on the moon. In Israel, the land of startup nation and innovation, when something fails, you actually don't look at it as something negative. It just means you have to try again. And so 2 days after the crash of Breshit, it was decided we're going to go for it again. And just last month in December, it was announced that it's going to happen in 2024, and we're going to launch Breshit 2. So it's pretty exciting of what's going on here. But from out into space, we're going to bring it right down to the land and go for an aerial view and tour of Israel through the animals and also through some of the incredible landscape here. So you can see that the Israel Nature and Parks Authority has as a symbol this tiny little guy called an ibex or a yael. And we're going to go on this tour. That this is the view kind of a lot of people think of Israel as being kind of very desertous, but this is Israel too. This is our ski season right now. It only lasts maybe like 5 days, but you can ski in the Hermon, and then that snow melt feeds into one of the 3 rivers. This is the Banyas, that then all come further south, form the Jordan River, which then empties into the Sea of Galilee and comes out here, as you can see, the Dead Sea and the Judean mountains above the Dead Sea. Anyone who's come to Israel has had that chance to float. These are small little ibexes, but as they grow up, they grow these horns, and they're battling it out really to see who gets to impregnate the females. Going further south into the Negev, you wouldn't really expect to see maybe waterfalls. This is a vulture called the nesher, very often erroneously translated as an eagle, but later on I'll show you an eagle. We have wolves here as well. This is a gazelle. We'll be talking about gazelles a little bit later on. And birds, another horned animal called an aurochs. Ein Avdad is right near where David Ben-Gurion and Paula are buried in the Negev. This is an eagle. This is called an ait in Hebrew. It's a golden eagle. This particular bird, though, I just think he's kind of fun because he's got a really bad haircut, kind of like David Ben-Gurion in a way, but it gives you a sense of the diversity of the animals here. The almond trees, we just had Tu B'Shvat, they're blooming now. The flowers are just now beginning to come out. And next month already we'll have those carpets of red kalaniot. But we have hyenas, and we also have jackals, and we have predators as well. And we have storks and a lot of birds. 500 billion birds come from Europe over our land here to rest, to feed, making their way to Africa. And then in the spring, they'll start to make their way back. There's a Crusader fortress right along the Lebanese border. And here we have a beautiful view of the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. Where right along the shores is the ancient town of Capernaum along the Mediterranean. You've all probably been to Caesarea, if on one trip, not another trip then perhaps. And in the lower Galilee, Megiddo, associated with Armageddon. Yes? I heard a voice. Okay. Masada, of course, where you can see the Dead Sea in the background. And now we're getting towards the end of our tour, where we're headed towards Eilat and the coral reefs, where you can see over into the country of Jordan on the other side. And the diversity of our landscape here really is pretty incredible. So to end then with this profile of the ibex, and to share with you though, this little guy here, this is an ibex. He's got a name, this little stuffed animal. He's called Artsy, from the word Eretz, which means land. So Artsy is like a kind of a fun name for him, kind of like Lassie, I guess you could say. And I took him to sit on a sculpture of a gazelle, which you saw in the movie. So these little horns tell you that it is an ibex, Yael. A gazelle is a tzvi, and these are names that are given to kids in Israel. Yael is a very common name, and so is tzvi as well. So hopefully you got a sense then, at least from the sky, what the landscape looks like. But we're going to be focusing though, first in the north. I want to show you where Ma'alot is, because Shir HaMa'alot and your deep connection with the city of Ma'alot. In the red circle though, we're going to look at a couple of places in the lower Galilee, Usha, which is an archaeological site right now, Hanaton, which is a kibbutz, and then we'll go to the national park of Tzipori. So Yella, let's get going here and head on off to see something incredible, but I need to give you some more directions. Some of you may remember me doing this on the bus. So if you feel comfortable doing this, kind of shake out your left hand and you put it on your head like this. And my finger there, that's called etzba. And that is the Etzba HaGalil, or the panhandle of Israel. That's where all those birds were flying by. The Golan Heights goes north-south. And of course, just where the lower arrow is pointing right to my left armpit, take a look at the map. That's the Sea of Galilee. That's where you sweat, isn't it? And then my right arm, my right hand's holding the microphone, but my right shoulder is Haifa. So you really get a sense of how the map of the north really is on your body. Something exciting was uncovered as a road was being expanded. An ancient mikvah, a 2,000-year-old mikvah. And it was decided that nearby kibbutz Hanaton said, we want to bring this mikvah to our kibbutz. Why? Because already on the grounds of the kibbutz, they have a pluralistic mikvah, one called Shemaya. This is the entrance to kibbutz Hanaton. This is a Chanukiah then, that every Hanukkah would be lit. And this pluralistic mikvah is that it doesn't matter what your affiliation is. Anybody can make an appointment to use the mikvah. It is not under the control of the Orthodox Rabbanut at all. Dr. Rabbi Chaviva Nir David is the one that really has spearheaded this. And other members of the kibbutz said when this ancient mikvah was just found a few miles from the kibbutz at the junction that they all drive past, that there was a crowdfunding thing very quickly to raise the money. And as you can see, it's been moved. It's now going to find its final home on kibbutz Hanaton, where eventually, hopefully, people will be able to once again immerse themselves in this ancient mikvah alongside the mikvah that they already have. It's actually a pretty exciting thought. So from Hanaton, we're going to go to an archaeological site called Usha. And what they really have in common is the subject of mikvah, the ritual baths, where then we go in with our feet, with our regline. That's how we go in first. And as I play this next video, there was a little bit of wind. So that's one of those issues when you're doing a virtual tour. Keep your eye out for Artsy. I think you'll be able to catch a couple of glimpses of him. This is a topographical map that shows us that we're going into Usha that follows what's called the Sanhedrin Trail. I'll talk to you about that a little bit more, but there he is, hanging on to the pole of the Antiquities. Let's listen.
Welcome to
ancient Usha, where one of the industries in this city was making olive oil. You take the olives off the trees. First thing you have to do is gather them. They would be brought here. And then you get to that first stage of crushing, as we saw, crushing and cracking open, letting that first oil then be released. And we've seen many of these throughout the country. We have many.
So no matter how actually that first process begins, it is indeed a process before we finally get to something like this that you find in Machane Yehuda, different ways to make olives.
Different styles later on. There's a more sophisticated kind of a corkscrew style. But when you need to squeeze the oil here in Usha, you would have used ancient weights that would have had a beam. And that beam in Hebrew is called a bod. So this is the house of the bod, big bod. But what makes Usha here so unique, and what has been found in so many other olive houses throughout the country, is a mikvah. Right down here, steps leading down into what has been determined to be a kosher mikvah. What's so significant about this? It means then that this oil was not being produced, at least the theory is, not just for eating, for your salad, for your lighting, but also if somebody needed to ritually immerse themselves in a mikvah before producing this oil, then maybe this was part of the industry that was used for ritual purposes as well. Here in Usha, they just didn't make olive oil. What else did they make? Olives, one of the seven species that are mentioned in the Bible. And because of the wind, to also explain it again, that if my arm is a wooden beam, you would have attached to my fingers then these weights that would have crushed then the olives that had initially been crushed by the stone, placed into baskets, and then the weights would bring the beam down to make that first pressing, which is what we call extra virgin olive oil. And then subsequent pressings, you would get to eventually a cruder kind of oil that then later on would either be used for lighting at the very end of it. So what other things did they make at Usha? As I said, this archaeological site is very, very off the beaten track. In fact, it's not even yet open to the public. And when I
that mutes it.
You don't hear?
No.
When I went here to film, though, I had to get permission to go into the site. But let's see what else they produced at ancient Usha. It's harvest time, August, September. We brought our grapes to Usha. Here, this is where we're going to crush them. Actually, with our feet, we're going to take our socks and our shoes, our sandals off, and we're going to stop them with our feet so that all of the juices run down into two different channels. One here, one over there, so that the grape juice could come out of it and wine could be prepared. In order for this, though, wine to be ritually used and not just for having a fun 5 o'clock somewhere drink, has to do with the mikvah that was found here. Now, when I came here to ancient Usha, I actually really did want to do this. I wanted to take off my shoes and socks and show you how it's done. The archaeologists now, they didn't really like that idea so much. So I've got another way to show you, for you to understand how feet stomp grapes. And before I show you that, then to now explain that we've been introduced to olives and to grapes. And we've got then 5 other species of the 7 species. So see if you can start to think about those. Maybe put them in the chat. We've got olives, we've got grapes, we've got red, we've got pomegranates, we have dates, figs, 2 different kinds of grains, wheat and barley. So it's really a land that's filled with indigenous fruit and foods. So how can I help you understand? Well, get ready to laugh, okay? Okay, you get the idea. It's a classic I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball scene. It was filmed, I don't know where, but that actually is the way that grapes used to be stomped here. And when grapes were stomped, just as olive pressing and olive making had a special word called a beit bad, or the house of the beam, grapes actually were stomped and processed in something called a gat. So we've now been to Usha, we've now been to Hanaton, and we are going to visit Tzipori. Tzipori, in terms of our Jewish heritage, is very important because in the third century, Judah the prince edited and correlated what we call the Mishnah, gathering all of the oral law, putting it together, and then that was later on debated, and that is what we call the Talmud. In Tzipori is also where the Sanhedrin sat. So when the temple was destroyed in the year 70 in Jerusalem by the Romans, the Sanhedrin, which was like the high court, the Supreme Court, moves to a small town south of today Tel Aviv called Yavna, and then later on, because of another rebellion called the Bar Kokhba revolt, goes up north. It goes to Usha, Shvaram, eventually to Tzipori, and finally over to Tiberias, not far from where we saw Rachel's grave, and there it is disbanded. But we're going to be focusing a little bit on Tzipori from some other issues as well. So let's head out to Tzipori.
Boker Tov from Tzipori, downtown Tzipori, ancient lower Tzipori. How do you know that it's morning? Because I'm standing on the Decumanus, Roman Byzantine time period, east-west city, and I'm looking right into the sun right now. This is going to intersect in a few steps from here with the Cardo that goes from north and south. Cardo coming from the Latin of our heart, because that really was the heartbeat, the center of the city. So join me for the Decumanus meeting up with the Cardo.
Found on the Decumanus, actually carved into the Decumanus, was a game that was played by Romans, not by Artsy, but by Romans.
As we're walking down the Cardo, you can see the grooves in this ancient road where prior to our feet being here, you had the wheels of carriages making their indentation in the limestone. What was decorating the side of the Cardo has now been preserved by the Antiquities Authority. That measures the height of the Nile River.
One theory is that perhaps the workers came all the way from Egypt.
Back on the Decumanus, our story really of Tzipori is up in that hilltop. Let's go to the top. We're up at the top now, and it's almost 100 degrees out here, but there's a beautiful breeze over the Nitufa Valley, and being up at the top here of the hill, this Acropolis, is why we get the name Tzipori, because we are at a bird's eye view of the valley.
Out of the heat now, this is a triclinium, part of a villa from the 3rd century. Who lived here? Well, the triclinium, look at the beautiful mosaics here. Somebody obviously very wealthy, the Mona Lisa, as she's called. But I'd like to show you on at least the right-hand side, you can see writing that says, "To your health." There was a private bathroom here, but probably what was most interesting is in the center of this mosaic, there was a drinking contest between Hercules and Dionysus. And who won? Well, Dionysus did. The citadel has been built and rebuilt. Different time periods. Here's a 2nd century sarcophagus that was used later on, where eventually even the Crusaders are here. And this is their base in the Galilee. The Jewish residential area over here leads us into the area of the theater, where Jews lived amongst Romans, trying to find where is that balance between maintaining Jewish identity and not. What were some of the issues?
Probably was asked by many who lived here as a minority Jewish population. To Jew or not to Jew? That is the question.
Some rabbis said, don't go to the theater. Too many strange ideas, and you'll see the prostitutes, those statues that you would pass by. That's where we get the word prostitute from. So do you go or don't you go?
And these issues of Jewish identity are definitely appropriate to talk about in Sipori, because going into the synagogue here, which you can see then an artist's idea of maybe it was a two-story building. You can see part of the mosaic, which was found accidentally in 1993 as a parking lot was being expanded, is questionable because smack in the middle is a zodiac wheel. The arrows refer to the four corners, there are four women for the four seasons, and right in the center, Helios, the sun god, in a synagogue. And yet, at the time, in the third, fourth, and fifth, even to the 6th century, these zodiac signs, as we can see here, Pisces and Aries and Taurus. So here we can see Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio myself. And you can see Sagittarius, and you can also see then Libra. These were not in contradiction to Jewish values. They were used to enhance the synagogue. But really I want to focus on, with you as you get a general sense here, is the upper part, the direction, where the stones are just in front of the white chairs here. That's where the Torah scroll would have stood. That's where the altar was. And Shira Malot, you're praying to the east. In Israel, you pray in the direction of Jerusalem. So then this is supposed to be orientated south. However, there were some restrictions with the topography. So what the mosaic artists did is take a look at the flames of the candle of the menorah. They're saying, follow the flames. That's the way to go up to Jerusalem. Follow the flames. They're not upright because they had to slightly skew the synagogue. So indeed, though, they could still tell people your heart and your prayers are facing Jerusalem. So we're going to go up to Jerusalem now. We're going to leave the Galil. We're going to see how many people in Shir HaMa'alot can fit into my 7-seater tourist vehicle. You can see my logo on the side there. Actually, during COVID times, I had to sell it, unfortunately, but I'll get a new one when tourism comes back. We're going to all cram into this little vehicle and go from the Galil all the way up to Jerusalem. Notice the terminology, because even though we're going south, spiritually, we're going up. And we're going to be driving along that red line, which is the Jordan Valley. Now, once we would get to Jerusalem with a group, what we first would do is probably go to an overview so we could have a Shechianu moment. Very often that overview is from the Has Promenade, what is sometimes called in Hebrew the Tayelet, also referred to as Armon Netziv. And just recently, an exciting archaeological discovery was made there. So that's the video we're going to see next, from the same view that many of you have probably been at. So Yella, let's go.
And Shari, as we're watching this,
you can see the beautiful view behind me, the old city of Jerusalem.
Sorry?
we have about
Go ahead.
8-10 minutes left.
Yeah.
From the promenade, known as Armon HaNetziv in Hebrew. In English, it's the governor's house.
A few months ago, I directed an archaeological excavation on behalf of the Israel Antiquities Authority and funded by the City of David Foundation, the Ministry of Tourism, and the Jerusalem Municipality.
2,700 years ago, during biblical Jerusalem, the times of the Judean kings, a royal estate was located here. This is the time between the Assyrian assault on Jerusalem and the time of the Babylonian conquest. In the course of the excavation, our greatest surprise was when I heard the digging vessels scraped on a large stone, and when we brushed it clean, it was the most beautiful decoration I believe ever found of the capitals decorated in that manner from the First Temple period. And we had a great surprise when, after removing that ornamented capital, we found a second one immediately underneath it. We're in the Israel Antiquities Authority storeroom. Here we have some of the examples of the most beautiful finds that decorated probably the patio or supporting a porch of a palace or a royal villa. I was so excited when we found them. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. The experts say that they are the most beautiful in their composition, in their execution of masonry and design. We're very lucky to have them preserved in this manner. We have mini capitals decorating a window, a base of a beautifully ornamented pillar. On top of it, we can put this decorative capital. The sill was on top of that. I would call that late Iron Age Windows operating system. And it's not by chance that on the 5 shekel coin, we have the impression of the capital just as found in these excavations. Something unique from the kingdom of Judea 2,700 years ago, imprinted on a modern coin in the modern state of Israel.
That's pretty impressive what was just discovered. And so from there, we would be going into the old city, through the Jaffa Gate, down to the Western Wall. Some incredible photographs. That is the Davidson Center of a friend of mine. Give him a shout out, Yeshua Levi, who really has a beautiful eye with the camera. And I'm sure many of you remember those moments when you went to the Western Wall for the first time.
Howard Harry.
What was found at the Davidson Center was this particular stone. Right here where the red arrow is, the convergence of the Kotel, the Western Wall, and the Southern Wall. We're giving you the transliteration. It says Lebeit, to the house of Hatkiah, which reminds you of Tkiah, Lehachriz, to declare or to announce. And from a major height, the trumpeter would announce the coming of Shabbat. So we can see then a shofar, another Yeshua Levi photograph, and that sound of the Tkiah. This is an image of what the Southern Wall would have looked like when we would say Shir Hamalot, a song of ascent. I was glad when they said to me, let us go up to the house of the Lord. And one thing to teach you about Hebrew slang during this time period especially is the word katan, which means small, the opposite of large, gadol. Aleinu, you know this word at the end of any service, Aleinu l'shabeach, it is upon us. Put them together, katan, Aleinu means we got this. 40 Israeli musicians got together, a song was written, katan Aleinu. We're just going to hear a small piece of it, but during these difficult times, this past year, when you haven't been able to come here, keeping the attitude of, we've got this, katan Aleinu. There'll be a phrase in here that talks about the smells of Shabbat. It's still Shabbat by you right now. Katan Aleinu. Katan Aleinu, a lot of gratitude there. And to conclude, we're going to look a little bit at food. Al tam v'reach ein hitvakech. It rhymes beautifully in Hebrew, but basically to each their own. Everybody loves their own hummus and falafel, different spices. Some people like spicy, I don't. Sababa, it's also slang. It means cool, it's great. Great cookbook of Dina Sussman's Sababa. And that's the way I like to drink my coffee when I go to Machane Yehuda. So al tam v'reach ein hitvakech, and we're going to finish actually with me buying a falafel.
I'm really hungry. I want to go to Tzidkiyahu and get a manaf falafel, a portion of falafel in a pita. That's the way I like it. I got my money ready. Come on. Do you want spicy? Wait, what about chips? Do you want chips in your falafel? Tzidkiyahu, one of my favorite places to get falafel. Look at it. It's all over my hands already. That's the way it needs to be. And the te avon, look at all that tahina. Oh. Is that good? I really wish you could taste it. Next trip to Israel.
And next trip to Israel, God willing, very soon. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of Israel with you, and can't wait for you.